Welcome back. This is Intro to Physical Anthropology. I'm David Leitner, your instructor. And today we're going to talk about bioarchaeology, a little bit about what it is and also what it can tell us about the past. So without further ado, let's get started. So bioarchaeology is basically the use of human biology, knowledge about human biology in an archaeological context. So applying what we know about physical anthropology to burials, to human remains that are found that are older than um, about 100 years or so. That has to do with legal considerations, so we'll talk about that another time. But yeah, for the most part, bioarchaeology is just the use of archaeological and physical anthropology techniques to understand information about multiple individuals in a population to better understand disease, injury, and so forth about that population. Now, one of the most interesting things about the bioarchaeology of humans beginning about 10,000 years ago is the effects of the agricultural revolution on humans. There was this long period where agriculture was actually, if it was ever going to be successful, it was going to be during this time. It was the sort of last thermal maximum in this interglacial cycle, and we are now sort of on the, supposed to be on the down slope. I've described before why we're on the upslope. But it allowed us to do a number of things. One of the most interesting things that more recent research is coming to in terms of how the agricultural revolution began is that it appears that actually, rather than being sort of a way to have more secure food sources, it actually had more to do with the fact that larger and larger religious celebrations were demanding greater resources, more, especially resources used to ferment into alcoholic beverages. This is particularly true at a site called Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is the oldest known man-made structure, around 11,000 years old. It's amazing. It is clearly a religious structure, and in some of the containers we have the dried remains of wine. Enough sediment in it that we can actually test it genetically, and they have found out that it is related to in fact, it's the ancestor of the current local grape varieties in that region. So it really appears that it was sort of religion that sparked the need for agriculture, because they needed to know they would have enough grapes to turn into wine. And this seems to be a common theme, actually. We make alcohol for religious celebrations, and that's why we need agriculture, because we need to make it on scales that are larger than what we can just gather at any one point in time. So that's an interesting development. But along with it came a number of massive changes to the way human beings lived. The first being that the variety of our diet actually reduced significantly. The thing about hunter-gatherer diets, although there are periodic mild periods of famine or shortages of food, that overall you have a wider range of nutrition because you're eating seasonally what is available. seasonally, locally available resources that you consume then. You're not saving it necessarily for a long time later. That doesn't mean hunter-gatherers don't save food and preserve it. The other thing that happens is it allows people to settle in larger and larger communities, and that leads to a division of labor. In hunter-gatherer communities, everybody kind of needs to know how to do everything. And everybody does. And certainly people who are better at some things are sort of looked to sort of do those things. But everybody knows how to do things. In agricultural societies, we stop that and we start having divisions of labor. So if you grow crops, you grow crops. And since you're so busy growing crops, maybe you don't have time to hand make the tools that you need to do that. So maybe in exchange for something else, you make a trade with someone who does know how to make those tools. And then you have this sort of economic relationship. Well, what that very quickly leads to, at least what we can see in the archaeological record, is not only a quick division of labor, but the beginnings of social stratification, because various prestige is placed upon each of these jobs, either through a class or a caste system. And as a result, you sort of, for some people, you exacerbate that the issue of not having a nutritionally varied diet. And so we start seeing this in the biological record, in the archaeological record. We have been able to see that for the vast majority of people in these societies, very quickly life became sedentary. That is, most of the activities didn't require a lot of varied physical labor. Rather, they were sort of doing things that either required less activity overall, less physical activity, or generally didn't travel as far, because of course being in hunter-gatherer societies, you have to travel and go where the food is all the time. We noticed that there's also signs of malnutrition in skeletons that start appearing. An increase in the number of dental caries, that is cavities. So that probably has a lot to do with relying heavily on starches, like grains or other starches, more so than they would have. Doesn't mean hunter-gatherers don't eat starches and don't eat grains. They do, but it's not as big a part of their diet year-round. We also notice that despite the fact that agriculture is intensely physical, the overall bone strength starts to decrease as well in many agricultural populations compared to previous hunter-gatherers in the area. We also notice, should actually say, an increase in the presence of arthritis, so inflammatory diseases. Although it wasn't every culture that sort of got significantly weaker, there is a general trend there. And we also notice changes in the cranium. So it's not just postcranial anatomy that is affected, but the cranium itself. The size, shape, and strength of the jawbone especially, as well as sort of the face in general, problems of dental crowding, that sort of thing, come about because we switch from usually slightly less processed foods, and by process I simply mean like what you do to prepare the food. I don't mean like industrial processes, but bread is a soft food, as opposed to eating raw grain, which tends to have harder bits of fiber in it, which wears your teeth down more, and requires more chewing. Okay. So we start to see changes to the shapes of the faces. One of the main effects is that it's the way our teeth, having this overbite, all of us in Euro-American societies sort of value as like the norm, having a slight overbite is wrong. Our incisors should come together at the tip. And that normally would happen because we would be eating tough foods that required us to pull more to get them off the bone or off the leaf or whatever. We just use our jaw muscles a lot less. We don't use our teeth the way we used to. And that has had a massive change in the size and shape of our faces, especially around the jawline. Like I've said before, too, there's also a steady decrease in cranial capacities that begins around this time. It's unclear if it's because of agriculture or if we have larger populations, so our sampling is better. So, in fact, actually, it never changed. We just have a more statistically significant outcome here. Or if or if it's malnutrition or what, or if the brain's just getting more dense rather than bigger. We don't know for sure why that is, but it does happen around this time. So not enough evidence to say that agriculture makes you stupid, but it is suspicious why this is happening. And of course it doesn't make you stupid. It just leads to physical changes. One great example is on the Channel Islands in California in prehistoric times. We noticed there was a shift in population growth as marine sources became more and more plentiful there. Population steadily grew. Well, it's an island. It's a finite system, right? Increased population then led to general health decline, especially the evidence of linear defects in tooth enamel. So like horizontal ripples on the surface of the teeth. That's the result of either fevers or malnutrition. Okay. Fevers would be because larger populations tend to spread disease more quickly, as we have been in a big experiment finding out this past year. Increase in cranial fractures as well, possibly as a result of intrapersonal violence, so intra-group aggression, basically. So it could be that the larger population size led to more violence, which led to these injuries. Now, it's not just prehistory and agriculture where bioarchaeology sketches a picture of life. We can also see the effects of colonization through bioarchaeology. A lot of infectious diseases leave their marks on the skeleton. Syphilis and tuberculosis are just to name two. We can see their presence thus sort of long after the soft tissues have disappeared. We notice spikes in these things after contact with in indigenous populations after they are contacted by colonial civilizations. Syphilis, people used to think that it actually originated in the Americas, but actually it turns out it's the other way around. Europeans actually, it didn't exist in a lot of places, but it existed in Europe. Europeans brought it to the Americas and spread it. So these diseases leave marks, so we can tell that with the advent of colonization, a lot of diseases like this go on the upswing. We see a very sudden increase in them. Also, European contact influenced cultural practices in ways that we can see. Burial caves in Mangaya, for instance, continued to be used. They disposed of their dead in the burial caves, but they no longer placed them in the traditional way and treated the bodies in the traditional way, and the burials started looking more European as a result. So also that may be largely due to the fact that we notice it starts around the time that they have contact with Christian missionaries, and Christianity seems to be a big trigger for changes in things like this. So again, bioarchaeology, even though that's not on the body itself, it's the way the body is treated, it shows us the significance of cultural contact, and a significant change, sudden change in cultural practices. That's my quick tour of bioarchaeology. Thanks again for joining me. This is the last lecture in this chapter, and I hope you take care of yourself this week and have a good time, and I will see you soon.